Hello and welcome to episode 104 of MMO Weekly, presented as always by Chitty's Cheesesteaks. I'm your host, Sal Manzo, joined by MMO Executive Editor Mike Mayer, and we have a very, very special guest on the show today. You might know him from some favorites as Cobra Kai, Harold and Kumar, American Reunion, and the reason why we're here, huge Mets fan, Jon Hurwitz. Thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Good to see you guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, John. I know that you actually were down in spring training recently for your first trip to spring training.
It was the best. It was a weekend I'll never forget. I went with my daughter, who is 14 years old, giant Mets fan. Her middle name is Shay, so I kind of forced it on her early on. But no, she loves the Mets the same way I do, follows just as closely as I do.
So it looks like you tweeted out video. Looks like you guys had pretty good seats for Soto's first home run.
We did. It's fun. We went down there specifically. It was like, have never been to spring training. We're like, Juan Soto's here. Let's see if we can get there for his very first at-bats as a New York Met. And it did not disappoint.
I mean, how could it, right? It's storybook stuff. You can't, or maybe you can write that. But can you kind of just talk about overall, like what the experience was like at spring training for you? Did you meet with the Cohens at all? Like what that kind of whole weekend was for you? As you mentioned, was your first time there.
I was, I had, some special treatment. So I was able to, wander the VIP sections. Sure. So that was pretty cool. I got to talk to some of the beat writers, which was exciting for me. Some of them I've kind of either known through social media or maybe met briefly before. So it was good to speak with them, get some insights there. We were positioned in a really good situation where there was opportunities for autographs. My daughter got basically everybody that you'd want on a baseball, with the exception of maybe Kodai Senga, Sean Manaea, and Peterson. Some of the pitchers were a little bit harder for us to access, but we were there for 3 days. The first day we were there for, just practice. So we were getting to, wander around. There was one period of time where we wandered a little bit off the beaten path where we probably shouldn't have been. And that's when we met Pete Alonso. Wow. And he was awesome, signed 2 balls for us. Met Jesse Winker there, who's a big favorite of my daughters and myself as well. Saw Nimmo, who I've met several times over the years. He's always really great, but we got Francisco Alvarez, we got Clay Holmes, Brandon Sproat, Jet Williams. And then the final day, which was the big day, okay, are we going to get these guys? We were there for batting practice. Right behind there, got Juan Soto, got Francisco Lindor, and got Mark Vientos, Swaggy V, who's another favorite of my daughter's. So it was great. I did, the staff there treated us very nicely. It was really good. Spoke a bit with, people within the organization, and it was just awesome.
That's so cool. I mean, outside of the obvious, like, I just wondering what the vibe like is around camp. Are the guys, the players excited? Like, what's the overall vibe? It seems like they, obviously the other night they were having fun, joking around the dugout, Soto and company. But like for you, what did it look like that the guys, it seemed to be very high spirits before the season gets going?
I mean, it was great. People were getting their work in, having fun together. I was there for a couple of days of batting practice, so I really got to see, the different groups in batting practice and see kind of who's batting with one another. And, it's, the big boys are there all together. Everyone was in good spirits. People were working hard, a lot of joking around that you saw going on there. And it was just the energy when the game started was amazing. The first game fully sold out.
Sure.
Fans were excited. Fans were pumped up. And it was early in spring. I know that you get a few weeks into spring training. These guys are going to be eager to get to New York, but spirits were high.
And like you said, this is your first spring training, and obviously the crowds you saw aren't always what happens in spring training, but it was the Soto effect. And that's obviously what's happening for this year is the Mets have these expectations going into the year that they're not really used to. I mean, they went on a great run last year, but they still didn't have these expectations to start last year. And so you can talk about as a fan how how you feel about the Mets and how kind of you get there with signing Soto, bringing back Alonso, and the great offseason that the Mets had.
I mean, as a fan, I'm excited. I'm on cloud nine. I'll just say, I'm somebody, in my job, I know what it's like to put together an organization. I know what it's like to work as a team. I know all the little attention to detail that you need to succeed in what you're doing. And as soon as Steve Cohen bought this team, I was like, okay, we're on a path right now. We're on a path. He just needs to put the right pieces in place. And David Stearns was that final piece, and Mendoza, I will say. But I'll say Stearns in terms of having an architect who knows what they're doing, who has a proven track record for many years. It's in David Stearns I trust when it comes down to it. So, I do enter the season with, some anxiety about the pitching staff. As everyone has, it didn't help when Minaya and Montas had their injuries. Hopefully Minaya is back fairly quickly. But when you're looking at the way Holmes is looking, when you're looking at the way Peterson looks, when you look at Kodai Senga, and then a number of other guys in camp are looking impressive. And if we can have a strong bullpen and the guys like Kranick, the Reed Garretts of the world, obviously Edwin Diaz, Minter, Stanek's back. I feel like we have a strong bullpen, a stronger bullpen than last year. The pitching staff, I think, will be strong enough. And when you have an offense like what we have, and that's really the big thing, you score a lot of runs, you make the playoffs. That's just the way the numbers have been the last few years. So, I did feel it in the playoffs last year a little bit when, you were missing kind of those clear horses in the starting rotation, and felt some of that. I mean, I live in Los Angeles, so I go to the Dodger Met games whenever they're here, and I've seen some of the best playoff games of my life.
Sure.
Here. The 2015 run was one of the greatest experiences of my life. But I would like to see a little bit more. I was on the get Quintana in here kind of camp when injuries started happening. I would have maybe liked a Walker Buehler type, but I also respect the process that Stearns has, identifying pitchers who have good stuff or have stuff that they could work with and see what they do, because clearly it worked last year and it has worked for him in the past. We'll see how that goes. And then I think we got some pitching coming up that's looking good, and I don't mind the expectations. I'm okay, with these expectations. The players, I think, have the right mindset. We have the right team there, the coaching staff. We'll see. We just need to, keep healthy and keep fighting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I obviously you mentioned, guys in camp like that. Was there anyone maybe that stuck out to you in camp that maybe you think is going to fly under the radar through here and maybe make an impact at the start of the season? I'm curious.
I mean, in terms of making an impact in a new way, it's interesting. I've been very curious about Jose Siri.
Sure.
I know that his batting average is complete garbage in the past. I like how he's got the power. I like how he's got the speed, and I like how he's got the swag. I like how he has the defense that's next level. I thought Harrison Bader was amazing in center, and his numbers are even better in the field. So, and the eye test shows you that he can do some really good things. He's a weird, he's showing himself in spring training early on with these big home runs. What I'm curious to see is, will the influence of the players around him, the Lindors, the Sotos, those kinds of guys, help him get a little bit more discipline at the plate, maybe strike out a little bit less. It's not about he doesn't have to be suddenly hitting 280, but if he could get his average up to 235 to 250, somewhere in that range. And I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but then that's a really impactful player. I mean, I mentioned Kranick, he's, somebody whose stuff has just looked really electric. So, in the middle innings, he threw 3 innings that one day. I was like, are they stretching him out to start? Because I know he's done it in the past, but it looks like they're serious about him in the bullpen. Those are a couple under the radar ish kind of players that, are not the ones that, I'm obviously excited to see all the big time guys, but, I'm curious if around the edges, some of these guys will step up.
No, that's a good point. And like you said, Kranick has looked really good this spring, and their pitching depth took a little bit of hit already with the 2 injuries. So having a guy like Kranick, assuming he can stay healthy, which has been his issue in the past,
Sure.
assuming he can stay healthy, he certainly gives them a big boost. Peterson looked really good the other day, kind of just jumping onto exactly where he left off last year, where he was actually one of the Mets' best starters. And one guy I would throw in there, maybe not to start the year, but later in the year, is a guy you mentioned, is Brandon Sproat. He's one of the best pitching prospects in baseball. So I think he's probably a guy that we'll see at some point this year. Look, every team needs 8 to 10 to 12 starters every year. And I think Sproat is the type of guy that maybe May, June, around then, he'll be able to slide right into the rotation. And this is a guy that has, I mean, he's got ace potential. So he's looked good in spring too. He just got sent to minor league camp, but that's kind of just one of those things that happens this time of year. Just a paper move. He'll still pitch in big league games, but he's definitely someone I would keep an eye on.
Oh, I'm excited to see Sproat, in the big leagues. I was really excited. I was high on Scott last year. It was fun when we watched him. He had the flashes that looked really, really strong. He didn't quite, as the games would go on, he wasn't quite able to, keep putting people away. And then obviously had that unfortunate injury. So I look forward to his eventual return. But Sproat is one of those guys, even higher upside potentially. And his stuff looked great. When I was there, I got to watch him, throw a bullpen session, and it was some special stuff there. So I'm high on him. I love, there's nothing I love more than during a Mets season when somebody surprises you. Someone comes up from the minor leagues, somebody, impacts the game. I'll never forget 1999 was one of my other favorite years as a Mets fan. And it's similar to last year. It was one of those seasons where we're not doing that well. It feels like we're not going to kind of go anywhere. And then suddenly it takes a real turn and goes in a real strong direction. And that was the year of Benny Agbayani, coming up. And it's who's this guy? And suddenly he's impacting you in a major way. So, this season will have its own storylines. Last year obviously had many exciting ones, and I can't wait to see how it unfolds.
Yeah, I mean, it's great points talking about these young guys. And I think in particular, the Mets are set up nicely. It seems like what could be a young, group, a young core here between the Acuñas. Obviously, we know Vientos. Hopefully, Beatty can make an impact. You mentioned Sprout. He's got a heck of a mustache. So hopefully that plays in the big leagues too. But it's exciting all around. We know we have the stars there. But like you said, even a Jet Williams, someone who could come in there at some point this year, play center field, be a spark plug. But it's all good things, on the horizon for the Mets, obviously, yeah.
Yeah, I will say, you mentioned Beatty, and everyone was high on him a couple years ago, and then he keeps getting you excited during spring training, and it's been disappointing. I will say when you're there in person, he's a big dude, and he's like an athlete. He looks the part of a major league star, and he's batting in batting practice amongst the stars. He's part of that group, that rotation. And, you dream on him a little bit. He needs to make that hard contact. He needs to make better, selection, pitch selection with what he's swinging at. But if he could just harness it, we saw Vientos kind of come and finally see his potential. It would be really nice to see Beatty step up. He's had a lot of opportunities in the big leagues, but he also didn't play that much in the minors, before he came up. So we'll see what happens, but he's somebody who obviously has impressed in camp to this point. And just, again, the eye test shows you a guy that has, he has the build, he has the look. So let's see him execute.
And he's playing some second now. So the Mets are kind of testing him out as a utility guy. And I think with the injury to Madrigal, I think there's a good chance that Beatty makes the opening day roster as that utility type player. Cause I think he makes, depending on how you want to go, I think he makes some more sense than Acuña because they could use the lefty bat off the bench. And you don't really – the Mets have been in a situation before where they haven't carried a guy who can play shortstop. You don't really need a backup shortstop because Lindor plays 156 games, 158 games a year. So if Lindor gets hurt, then you call up a guy that can play short like they did last year with Acuña. So you don't really need that bench guy that plays short. So I think there's a real chance that Beatty makes the team out of spring. And, he's certainly playing himself onto that. And like you said, it's pitch selection, it's hitting the ball with a little more authority, and it's hitting the ball with authority in the air, which we've seen. He's a guy who has not pulled the ball enough and pulled the ball in the air, and that's something we've seen in a small sample size, of course, because we're early in spring, but that's something that he has done so far this spring.
Yeah, I'm really curious about Acuna. Like I prefer him in the minors. I want to see him get more season because that AAA line was not good last year. And without him in the majors, we don't make the playoffs. Like what he did in that week or 2 weeks when Lindor had that injury, like he proved himself on the major league level at the highest stakes time of a season. So he can play at this level, but his track record was long enough last year in the minors to be unimpressive. So I want to see him, pick up his game. He obviously had a good winter league situation, but in my understanding is not the strongest of leagues. So let's see what he can do. And I'd like him to play every day. Whereas I'm at a place with Beatty right now where it's like, he's done all that he can in the minor leagues. Like get him up here, throw him in, get him, the occasional at bats. And I'm okay with him not playing every day because he has nothing more to prove in the minors.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great point. And, we're talking about the backup shortstop and that kind of role, but the Mets have a starting shortstop. Pretty good. Francisco Lindor, you mentioned him. How much fun was it just to watch that season last year for him? Obviously, once he went in the leadoff spot at the end of May, things just took off like a rocket. But just, talk to me a little about watching him and just your thoughts on him potentially becoming the Mets next captain. It's something you're for, not for. I'm kind of curious there what you think.
First of all, he's amazing. It's so funny what a difference like a few months make, because I remember being a couple months into that season last year, and it's like, there was a little bit of the drama on social media about like, we got to cheer for him. We weren't like, people were booing him and it wasn't great. It felt hopeless. I remember having this feeling like this is not going to get any better anytime soon. And then I actually came to New York, and I was at a Mets game with Ralph Macchio and his family. My family and his family like to go to Mets games together. And it was the JD Martinez home run game. And that was it was the day after Grimace. So it was like right around the turning point of the season. And watching Lindor for that rest of that season, watching him in the leadoff spot and the way that's where his leadership really, you felt it the most. You saw him there start a game, go after the at bat, either he'd get on base, or if he didn't, he was there always talking to the players in the dugout, telling them what's going on. That's another thing I'll say in spring training, watching him hanging, very close to Mendoza. Sure. He's over there. He's right by, he's, mixing it up. He's paying attention to every pitch throughout the game, even when, the non-starters were in there. I love seeing him. As for the captain stuff, to me, that's all about the players and how they feel. Like, I don't care at all from a fan standpoint about that stuff. What matters to me is how it feels in that clubhouse. Like, Nimmo's a leader too. He's been there for a long time. I know there's been a little bit of discourse the last few days about like, what about Nimmo and that kind of thing. Like, I think there's different leaders on this team. There's a lot of veteran presence. If him being captain in any way is going to make any of the other guys feel slighted in a way that like impacts the clubhouse in a negative way, then I'm less in favor of it. My speculation is these are all big boys and they all love Lindor. So if he gets named captain, my speculation is it's going to be because everyone's on board and everyone feels comfortable.
No, I mean, I'm personally would be all for it. I think from what you said, you see all the displays of it. I think he's going to be that no matter what. So if they formally grant to him, if Dave Wright does some ceremony, that's cool. But at the end of the day, I think everyone just wants him to hit leadoff, hit well, play great defense every day, and you'll take it from there, I guess. Exactly. But I have to pivot for a second. You mentioned Ralph Macchio, obviously another big Met fan. You guys go to games together. Real quick, I just want to know what it's like working with him, getting that cast back together, for Cobra Kai. Like, What has it been like for you, taking what seems like, the Karate Kid universe, and it's become this whole other huge thing that's so entertaining. So many people enjoy it, intergenerationally, watching it with like my parents from when they watched the Karate Kid when they were growing up. I'm just like, want to get your thoughts on all that before we pivot back to the Met stuff.
Sure. I mean, it's literally been the dream come true. In Hollywood, there's a lot of times where, whether it's a sequel or a spinoff, all happens just because of the business. And it's like, oh, the studio's like, oh, we have this IP and we're looking for this. That's the opposite of what happened here on Cobra Kai. This was a situation where myself and my two good friends, who I've been friends with since teenagers, my partner Hayden Schlossberg, I've worked with my whole career. He's one of my best friends from high school. Josh Heald, who's my other partner on this, is one of my best friends from college. Wow. We've all known each other forever, and we all bonded over movies and comedy. And Karate Kid was one of those movies that we bonded over, and we bonded over the Cobra Kais. That was a big element of it. We all love the inspirational story. We were very young when it came out and connected with Daniel. But as we got into comedy, as we were older, we thought there was something hilarious about this teenage karate gang that's terrorizing a high school. It felt ridiculous to us. We loved it, thought it was funny. We were really into Billy Zabka. And I'll say this, like, weird thing. When I was 19 and in college, I made a web page dedicated to Billy Zabka. Like, so I was put on this earth to be like, to make Cobra Kai. This wasn't something that like I got hired for in my 40s or I guess I was in my late 30s when I started making the show. But it was like, this was something that like was in my heart, not just the love of Karate Kid, but the love of that asshole, the bully from your high school. What happens to that guy? And it's a story that we wanted to tell, putting the cast together and getting the rights to Karate Kid was amazing. How that, just having to go and get those rights, then, getting Billy, who we knew at that point a little bit, and then getting Ralph was the bigger one. This is the Karate Kid. This is a guy who you're coming to him and saying, hey, we have this idea for a TV series version of the show of your franchise. And it's not called the next Karate or Karate Kid or Karate Man or any of that stuff. It's called Cobra Kai. And we enter the story through Johnny Lawrence, but it's equally Daniel's story as well. You see both of those characters. They're both protagonists. They're both antagonists. They're, and we created this whole new world around them. And I'll say working with everybody was amazing. Both those guys are complete gems. When you're making a film or a TV series, it's important that your actors who are sort of at the top of the call sheet are set an example for others, especially when you have young people on your cast. Sure. And for those guys to be the men that they are, without who they are, forget about them as performers, but without who they are as people, the show never becomes what it is, because it could have been a total disaster. But they were great. The whole cast is great. And the reaction all around the world has been, everything that we dreamed of and then some.
I mean, it's I've been watching it for the last few years. I finished it up last night. It's an awesome show. I love the movies. I started practice karate as a kid growing up. So with all that, it's really just such an entertaining show. You got an engagement out of it in real life too, which is really cool. Between a couple of your co-stars, which is awesome. I saw. But just a kind of last question with that, I want to tie it into baseball. You mentioned a little bit just kind of that process as far as running an organization, right? I'm just wondering, like, are there similarities to, from creating a show, writing it to the whole production, to running a baseball team, and kind of like, any like similarities between the two?
I think it's very similar. It's interesting because I always tell, like, when I talk about David Stearns being like a big deal and also Steve Cohen being a big deal, I'm not just talking about as like a fan. I'm talking as somebody who has like the life experience of like what it's like to have a big project that doesn't have enough money going into it.
Sure.
I'm somebody who knows what it's like to have a project and to put together a team. And and my philosophy has always been every single person who's working on the show matters. Every single little decision that you're making matters. When you're working on the script, you can't half-ass it. You need to put in the work on everything, and everyone needs to put in the work in the preparation to to succeed, because once you are on set, time is money, and you need to get your work done, and you need to, make sure that when the day ends, you got everything that you need. And it doesn't stop when you're done filming. The post-production process, you're continuing to make your project and make it better. And sometimes something didn't turn out exactly how you wanted it to. So you have to think creatively on how to figure out solutions to those problems. When I look at what David Stearns is doing, with the Mets, very similar. He and his staff are putting together a group of people, not just on the field, but behind the scenes, that all need to work together. You want to try to have people who aren't a bunch of assholes. You want a good group of people there, and people who are going to work together. And you're focused on every moment, every element of the organization. And during the course of the season, injuries happen. Unexpected things happen throughout, and you need to be able to not give up. You need to pivot, because you know that it's important that you win at the end. You got to make the playoffs. You got to, try to win the World Series, and you don't stop until the job is done. So it's a very similar kind of thing. And that's what excites me as a Mets fan right now, is just being able to, as somebody who knows what it's like to see things work and not work based on the work that's put in, and the preparation, and assembling the right people and the right processes. I know what it takes to succeed, and the Mets have the right people in place right now.
And that's a good segue, talking about the right people. As a Mets fan in your 40s, you have gone through varying levels of ownership with the Mets. How was it for you as a fan when Steve Cohen bought the team, and you kind of realized that this was going to be a completely different situation from how the Wilpons ran the team?
I was elated. It was one of those things where you heard murmurs that he might buy it. And then there was a period of time where it didn't look like it was happening. And then when it happened, I just remember calling all my Mets fan friends, talking to my dad, and just saying, the rest of my life is going to be so much better, because I care. The Mets are, outside of my family and my work, literally the Mets are everything to me. I don't pay attention to any other sports teams. I used to growing up. I was a Knicks fan. I was more into football. I was into, other sports. I don't have the bandwidth for that anymore. So my bandwidth is the Mets. That's what I follow all the time. So as soon as I knew there was a guy here who's richer than all the other owners, his wife is a huge Mets fan. That's important. I'll just say that. You want your wife to be happy, so it's he's got his wife, his father-in-law is a giant Mets fan. This is important stuff here. And so when the whole family cares, and when you heard him talk about how he viewed it as a responsibility to the fan base to do what it took, and also just knowing the kind of money he spends on art pieces and random stuff in his life, none of this money means anything to him.
Right.
He's a smart guy who cares about running a good organization. So he's not going to go crazy. That's why we didn't spend the money on Quintana when we didn't necessarily need to. He believes in the process and is working with the team, but it changed my life. I mean, overnight, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be incredible. And even when we've had failures, even when things happen where it's I remember I was on vacation. I remember I was in Hawaii when the Carlos Correa thing happened. I know Steve Cohen was in Hawaii on a different island than I was. I just remember that happening. And I was like, what? I was the team already was more stacked than I was used to. And then he was adding that on top. It just showed me he's not done. And then even the Verlander and Scherzer things, Scherzer was great for a year, unfairly maligned, I will say, as a fan. That's my opinion. But he was, but when those two guys were there, he was just going for it. And now that we have, the right, president of baseball operations in place, now that's the final piece of the puzzle for me as a fan to feel the confidence, because I was there for a long time. I will say that I'm more of the optimistic Mets fan in general, where every season I entered the season believing that we could make the playoffs, this whole time, and there were some pretty bad years, but I always would buy into maybe it's gonna, especially when I was younger, maybe it's gonna, work out right. But as I've gotten older and I understand the depth that's important and the things that are going on underneath the hood, the analytics department and the just having your minor league system more sophisticated and resources all over the place. I'm just you see where the Mets of the past were kind of not supported in the ways that they needed to be.
Well, I think that brings up a really good point that Steve Cohen's obviously spending the money to, as you mentioned, Scherzer, Verlander, both those guys got paid a lot. Lindor, the extension, and then spending the money on Soto. But he's also spending the money on the resources that they need off the field to make sure that they are catching up with teams like the Dodgers and other organizations that are well run. The pitching lab, I know we've started to hear more and more about that over the last year. We're starting to hear a little bit about the hitting lab trying to catch up to the pitching lab, and the hires that they've made, the pitching coach that they got from the Yankees over the offseason that looks like it's already paying dividends. So it's not just the on-field stuff. It's all these little pieces that Cohen, as you said, he's obviously a good businessman, given the money that he had to buy the Mets and the money that he has to give out to these players. So it's important to recognize all that stuff that he's doing too. And all the stuff that he's doing to kind of pay homage to the Mets history too. I think he's done a fantastic job. I mean, all the winning, losing, money aside, what he's done to make sure that everyone gets recognized, that's been a key part of Mets history, and doing it in the right way has just obviously been a really good thing for his ownership.
100%. I'll say, like, it's funny because, like, my favorite player growing up when I was really young was Doc Gooden, and Darryl Strawberry was one of my favorites. And obviously, there were some issues that went on in their personal lives and things like that. And there are times where players disappoint you or frustrate you because of, behavior in their lives in the past, that I think made it for the past ownership had certain resentments because they were there for certain things and just were like, I'll never forgive that guy, or I'll never give that guy. Like, they have in their own heads, like, whatever issues that were stuck there. But people grow up, and you see what wonderful contributors, guys like that are in the organization. And certainly they've always had love in the fan community. And to let people evolve in life and welcome them into the fold, and support them in the ways that they did. The number retirement was very emotional for me. I was watching that. I was loving it. I was excited when Darryl was kind of making his indirect plea for Pete. All of it was really special. And I think that, Steve Cohen and Alex Cohen and the organization are fan forward in the sense that, it's not their own egos and their own, hangups with anything. It's really just about, like, what are the fans excited about? Who are good Mets, who are people who identify as Mets in a great way, and let's embrace and let's all, like, have fun together. And it's a family, sometimes people in your family, you have ups and downs, but we embrace them all because we love them all.
Well, and speaking of family, I think that's kind of why Pete Alonso returns, right? Like, it always felt, I know it was a long drawn out process and there was a lot of stuff, rumors that flew around, but to me, it always felt like the Mets were always going to end up with Pete Alonso, no matter what happened in between, from him being a free agent to him signing, that he was going to be back with the Mets. Because look, it just made so much sense from an on-field and off-field. I mean, he's going to break the home run record at some point this year. Like, why wouldn't Cohen want Pete Alonso to be in a Mets uniform and break that record this year? And of course, it works out that he gets to get paid that amount for a first baseman for 1 year, and then potentially beat the record, have a nice year, and hit free agency again. So it worked out. But that's a kind of a under talked about storyline for this year, is watching him beat Strawberry. And how's that going to be for you as someone who grew up watching Strawberry?
I can't wait. I can't wait. You know, I'll say like I like Strawberry, like he's ready for the record to be broken. Like the fact that no one's broken the record for the Mets shows the problem with the Mets over the years was that we haven't had these long-term players there or players that are good enough to do it over a long stretch of time. When Pete Alonso stormed on the scene as a rookie and hit 53 home runs, that was special for all of us. And that was, you know, one of my favorite, you know, seasons to watch as a fan. And I love his personality. I love how he, you know, bleeds orange and blue. I love the goofiness. I love, you know, like the fun. Like I love him when Iglesias is singing "Oh My God," and there's that video at that benefit or whatever, and Pete's the first one dancing in there. You know, like Pete is a special guy. He's also a special player for my daughter who grew up with Pete, you know, as one of her favorite players on the team. So I look forward to it very much. Like you, I felt the same way. There was no period of time in the off season where if I was forced to bet, is he signing with the Mets or elsewhere, I would have every single moment picked the Mets. Like, you know, when there was a period of time where like, oh, no, they're pivoting. It's like, I don't know. I know that maybe the Mets were technically pivoting, but I don't buy the element that like I think they knew that if Pete came back, they were okay having Winker and having forgetting who else they signed at that moment. Was it Minter in there? But like, you know, whatever moves that they were making were moves that I felt they needed to make some version of anyway. And I just felt like they were putting out into the world that we are gonna move. And if Pete doesn't take this seriously, and if Boris doesn't take this seriously, like they're gonna lose his best opportunity to make as much money as possible this coming season. And from a business standpoint, it always made sense. I am curious going forward what's going to be there. You know, I personally am not in. I'm not in the Vlad Guerrero camp. I'm in the minority of that. I'm in the when I listen to David Stern's talk and I listen to Steve Cohen talk, and they talk about you can't sign more than one of these like Juan Soto things. I'm listening to what they're saying. Sure. And I don't buy them signing a guy for 10 years plus who has been a little inconsistent, even though he's as electric as he is when he's at the peak. I don't see them taking that kind of risk when the numbers are going to get up as high as they are. So maybe I'm wrong. And listen, if we get Vlad Guerrero next year, I will be thrilled. Don't get me wrong. I'm not somebody who's going to be disappointed to have Vlad Guerrero Jr. on this team. I just don't see it making sense within the way they're running this organization and with the things that they're actually saying. So it makes me curious about what is Pete's future here. You know, is he a guy who's ever going to get offered more than a 3-year deal elsewhere? Sure. And if that's the case, and he has a great year this year, why wouldn't the Mets pay him more than any other team? Because he's more valuable to the Mets just because of the brand. So maybe this is Pete's last year and it's famous last words. And if it is, and he gets Strawberry's record, it's great. And he goes out on a high. But if he, I'm still one of those, I'm the optimistic fan and sort of romantic by nature about baseball. So I'm still one of those guys that's hoping that even if it's, he comes back each year for a year, for 2 years or 3 years, that he keeps playing for us for a while.
Yeah, no, I mean, it worked out perfect for, I think, kind of all the fronts, right? Baseball wise, the Mets played the market for him perfectly. They weren't too emotional. They didn't overpay. They knew what his market dictated. They paid him, for the next couple of years, top AAV in the sport, but they understood the long-term commitment is tough, especially what they did with Soto, because Soto's probably going to be your first baseman in 5 years from now. That's another conversation. But from the baseball front, they do things in a sound way. They got their guy, and I think it goes to the other point of the now culture. We never heard about team or players talking about the culture of the Mets, feeling like a family, being treated well, being welcoming to their family and things of that nature. I know as fans, we don't think about it as much, but that stuff plays, from any job, right? You want to be in a good environment, a good culture. So I think it's just another element of getting big time players or anyone really wanting to come here and play for them, which is just kind of a complete 180 from what it was 15 years before that or something like that.
I'll just say the 2015 playoffs when Zach Wheeler was like, I guess the way he was treated during that after being injured all year and not being able to be kind of a part of the group and have his, himself or his family treated appropriately. Mm-hmm. It's insane when you think about that, given who the talent that he had, what he brought to the team and what he was going through at that time. Sure. Throw a few extra bucks around to treat the people who work for you appropriately. But I will say, it's been really great to see the way the things have changed. I know Alex Cohen plays a huge role in that, obviously. It sounded like Buck Showalter played a decent role in that as well. And that's a little bit unsung with that, he was somebody who walked around the clubhouse and said, this needs to be better, that needs to be better as well. So the right people have been in there to help bring about change over time. And it's nice to see a guy like a Jesse Winker, who's saying that all offseason, it was just like, I want to be back. And then it makes you feel sad for the Iglesiases of the world who sure. desperately want to be back too. And we as fans want to see, just because we love him so much. But you can't fit everybody on the roster, I guess. And, money plays a role, but the fact that people want to play for the Mets is truly special.
That's a perfect way to put it. And we don't want to keep you here all night. I just have one last question for you. Obviously you live in Los Angeles, it's enemy territory. I guess kind of, putting it bluntly, do you think the Mets have enough to compete with the Dodgers? At the end of the day, I think we know what the big dogs are. This feels like it could be the Niners and the Cowboys from the 1990s. The two horses going at it for, the league every year. So from what you're living in that town, being around Dodgers fans and all that, I'm just curious if you think now that the Mets have what it takes finally to maybe get past the big bag Dodgers this year.
I think that any team could win a series at any time, especially when you're really good. I think that the Dodgers, that offseason was disgusting. Sure. To see how they were so good. I remember just being watching in the playoffs last year, and their lineup is just relentless. It was just brutal being at that ballpark and not feeling you're stressed out every moment when everyone's batting and everyone's giving a good at bat. And it was and we didn't have the pitchers who are able to just blow you away. So it was really hard to watch. And then to see, the advantages that they had in bringing new players in and all that. All that being said, I like our team. I like our offense. I think that, the Dodgers pitching was not great last year. If you look at their overall stats, they were not a great pitching team, especially their starting rotation. So, even they had flaws. So I think it's the right hotness, the right time. It's the guys like the Juan Sotos of the world, leading the charge, and anything can happen. I'm going to believe. I'll choose to believe. And I just can't wait till the season starts.
Absolutely. Look, the Dodgers have a really good roster. And look, it's 162 games. A lot of things can change from now to then. Like you said, their starting pitching staff wasn't great last year. And that was a big part of that was due to injuries. They've tried to shore some of that up. So we'll see what happens. But the last question I had for you is what's your prized Mets possession? Whether it's a card, a jersey, a bobblehead, what is something that really has a big meaning to you?
Well, I have a Doc Gooden jersey that I've worn since 8th grade that I still wear today. So that's something that when I was at spring training games, I'm wearing that jersey. So that's definitely up there for me. Beyond that, I have some autographs over the years. I have Doc, I have Daryl, I've got Keith, and a bunch of the new guys, even just the stuff we got, a couple weeks ago, are new prized possessions. One thing that I don't have yet that I'm trying to figure out the right situation is I may want to buy one of those Shea Stadium seats That's something that I do not own yet. I want like the right situation. I want the right look. I want the right like way that I could present it, perhaps autographed in some kind of way. So I don't have that yet. But I'd say like if I had to say like my number one possession is that Doc Gooden jersey because I've had it for so long.
That's so cool. And I have a couple of seats, so we'll talk after this. We can maybe figure out a cameo, and then I'll get the seats to you. All good. Perfect deal.
Perfect. Sounds great.
Listen, thank you so much for being on the show tonight. We really appreciate you taking the time. Everyone, check out Cobra Kai if you haven't already. The season finale, phenomenal. And as always, we'll catch up with the latest spring training and home stretch here. Season's just around the corner, and we can't wait. So as always, let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets.